Hello and welcome to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host, Gary Morgan. And as always, my good friend, Jim Stam.
What is happening? Hey, listen, Clint Hurdle said something today. I don't know if you guys saw it, but he said that good pitching beats good hitting all the time and at every level. And I have a feeling we're going to talk some pitching today. So just thought I'd throw that out there and see what you guys thought, even our guest.
That's right. So returning to the show from the Ohio Baseball Science Academy, Eric Minshall. He's a former coach with the Pittsburgh Pirates. You may remember that from previous visits here. Welcome back, Eric. How you doing, man?
Doing great. Thanks for having me back on. I always enjoy it. Our conversations always end up in a really cool place. So I'm really happy to be back here in the middle of winter and freezing our butts off, getting ready for spring training to start.
Well, you are like a science nerd getting a chance to talk to Neil deGrasse Tyson, Tyson deGrasse, and pick his brain a little bit about supernovas. I love having the scientific angle of everything with pitching, but I want to start with something a little more silly. How many guys are coming in asking you to teach them a splinker?
It's starting to happen now. Yeah, we've got it's funny because it's mostly our college guys, but the high school guys are starting too, and that's the power of social media. They see it, they want to try it. And one of our pitchers who was just in over the winter, he's at University of Maine. He really has it now, like out of nowhere. It's pretty good. I was like, that's impressive. Like we were shocked when he started throwing it. So it's becoming a thing, and it's a really good pitch. It's a really good pitch. So hopefully we get better at teaching it so more guys end up with it.
He's giving it out like free source code, too. He doesn't care who knows it.
Thank you.
And as soon as someone learns it, do they instantly sprout a mustache, or does that come in slowly?
Well, I don't know if these guys are old enough to sprout the mustache. That's probably the problem there. But, that would be a nice, intimidating side effect.
Well, what have you thought of what you've seen? I mean, you're close enough to be observing Paul Skenes, and I mean, he's in your time zone and everything.
He's one of one.
Yeah.
He is one of one. And, I knew of him prior to kind of the, workup on him and the hubbubaloo, whatever you call it. I'm very close with the guy that was training him from an early stage, and I had seen a lot of videos of him already. Working out there and trying new methods and such. So I was just always impressed with his size and his ability to move, because normally guys that are that big struggle to move really well. But when you can kind of match up that much mass with the ability to move very efficiently and get down the mound very well, you've really got something. And he is one of one. People are like, oh, compare him to – no. Paul Skenes is Paul Skenes. He is one of one, and he obviously last year. I mean, that was just simply historic. What a fun! He's a lot of fun to watch. I mean, you're expecting everybody to get struck out or dominated, and he doesn't disappoint.
Eric, the thing that jumps out with me watching Paul, and you could speak to this far better than Gary and I can, but he just seems so mechanically sound. Like everything is just so tightly put together in the sense of like what he's trying to do. What jumps out at you? Can you speak on that part of it as well when you watch Paul Skenes?
Yeah, so it's consistency throughout the delivery. Again, ability to get down the mound, rotate very well, rotate the pelvis into position, and then let the arm ride along. Again, not many big guys can do that. So that's what's really impressive, is his ability to control his body in a very highly mobile way to get the maximum out of his delivery, and he does it all the time. And one of the things I look for, especially in guys that size, but just in general, is how does their delivery look from the first 10 pitches to their last 10 pitches?
Yeah.
That's when guys, once you get that fatigue factor going in, injury risk goes up, et cetera, stuff kind of starts to fade a little bit. I mean, granted, they hit him on a tight leash through 133 innings last year, which was just slightly up, I think, from the year before. But I'd have to look at that again with his minor league totals. But he does not wear down very much, which is good. I mean, that's the kind of like the secret sauce for him, is he keeps that consistent delivery, and he just keeps going. I mean, I'm really looking forward to see what he'll do this year. But yeah, it's impressive. I mean, how he moves and continues to keep himself healthy will really dictate the rest of his career.
You can tell the 100's natural too, because it's basically his resting bitch face, for lack of a better way of putting it. Yeah. That's just what he's got. And it's evidenced by how often he throws it. Because we watched Jared Jones, he has it too, but he didn't have it the whole season. Like, he had to back off if he was trying to stretch himself out. You find that with different pitchers. Is that all frame related? Or is it got something to do with one is giving max effort, one is maybe giving 95?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. A lot of it has to do with your functional strength and your mobility and ability to get down the mound and kind of maintain that torque and torsion as you're going down the slope to get to your delivery point, right? So, those guys we used to say, well, they're all freakish athletes. Well, now everybody's a freakish athlete. So when you really kind of look at Jared, just 6'1", 190, still very mobile, but it's super easy. There's not that. He doesn't look like he's coming unglued with every pitch. It's very, like you said, very natural, very easy arm action, which usually allows you to believe that everything's in the right place, and it's very smooth. So, there's a number of guys that have pitched over the years that you watch, and they have this. We say it in here. It's Mozart, Metallica. They lull you to sleep, and then boom, they're right on top of you. And when you throw 100, it's really on top of you. You have no time to adjust for that. And those guys are very deceptive. And really, in the case of, like, when you're talking about Skenes and Jones, they don't walk anybody. So when you see a lot of other guys that are, starters that throw 100, there's a lot of scatter. You look at their post-game report, and the balls are all over the place, and there's a lot of 3-2 counts, and maybe behind a lot. Those guys aren't like that at all. They throw a lot of strikes. They're in the zone. They have a very good command and multiple pitches that they can throw whenever they want, wherever they want. And that's really going to set those guys up to be a really good combination for a long time to come. And I'm really, really impressed. Jared being 6'1", 190-ish, approximately, being functionally strong and able to deliver the arm consistently without a lot of duress and stress. And he's gonna be okay. He's gonna be fine. I'm really curious to see how he's gonna do this year as well.
Oh man, interest already peaked, Jim. Perfect time for a break, right?
Yeah, let's do that break and we can jump back into it, because I've got another question about Jared Jones that I want to ask you too, Eric.
Sure, can do.
At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects.
All right, welcome back to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. Jim, I won't hog the stage. You go ahead and do the first question this time.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask you, Eric, take Jared Jones, for example. Not the biggest guy in the world. He's still primarily just got really two wipeout pitches, right? He's got his fastball. He's got his slider. If you were working with Jared and you're trying to pull something else out of him or get a third pitch that he can really rely on, because that to me seems like what's going to make the bigger jump. That's going to make the next big jump for him.
Yep.
Like, how would you as a coach or an instructor approach that situation with him?
Well, we do it with a lot of our pro guys. So the first thing you need to know is when you start looking at his metrics and charts about how his pitches move. So, if his fastball goes this way, okay? And we did this a lot with Musgrove. I just actually talked to one of his former assistant pitching coach with the Pirates about how we used to set him up. He liked to work what he called X's on the plate. So he had a lot of pitches to work with, but fastball runs, let's say you run a 4-seam and it's this way, and then you've got your slider. So coming at you guys, it would go this way. So you have this part of the plate covered for weak contact and swing and miss, but you really need something else to either go this way or this way. Very few guys like Lance Lynn he throws 3 fastballs. He's got his 4-seamer, he's got a 2-seamer, and he's got, a cutter that goes the other way. So he can throw you 3 of them and they go like this. So you don't know which one you're getting, right? That's very important. But it's really, when you're Jared and you're facing, let's say he struggled with lefties that are better than average hitters in the major leagues. Okay, so guys that are 265 and better. He let's say those guys actually hit 300 off of him.
So let me throw out a guy in particular that I think could give Jared Jones problems, like a Cody Bellinger that really can sit dead red on a fastball. And you're not going to get it by him, so you better pitch. You're going to have to pitch.
Also very good at that down and in slider.
Right. Okay. So let's go with the Cody Bellinger and how you would do that.
Well, so in that case, you want to get Cody off balance. So if he's hunting for that fastball, you need to show him a really good off-speed pitch, a changeup in that case that runs away from him, or a splitter that would run straight. Well, he's a low ball hitter, but if you throw the splitter in front of the plate, nobody hits it, so it doesn't matter as long as you get it down. So yeah, you need something. If this is all you have to fill that other gap somehow, and you kind of have to look ahead a little bit. This is one of the things I was just working with the American League Central team on. I was helping their advanced staff a little bit. Like, look at the schedule. Look at the schedule for next year. Look at the rotation. You pretty much know who's going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. The 5th will be figured out in spring training for a lot of these teams, right? And know how you're going to match up. Who are they going to face? Let's engineer our guys' stuff based on the fact of who we're going to try to face. So don't add a pitch that a team hits real well. And don't add, and something that doesn't match your slot. That's the other thing that we do a lot here is, we have kids that come in or college guys or even pro guys like, want to add a curveball. Well, if you throw from a 3/4 slot like this, it's really hard to get a banger out of that, something that comes 12-6. So your curve then turns into a slurve instead. So we have to always make sure that what we're asking a player to do, he can actually do from a physical standpoint of where his hand is at release. Okay. There are a few guys that can do, they can move their arm around, but that's not everybody. And it's really, really hard to do. So, we would want to match up off of his arsenal. I'm a really big believer, in the Perry Husband system with effective velocity, being able to tunnel. We have a really good training method here. We keep everybody in basically about the size of a basketball tunnel. Earlier in their career, we try to get that down to a volleyball size tunnel where everything is the same through at least 50 feet, if not maybe 54. And then it spreads out because you've already committed to your swing.
Right.
And very few guys, there's only so many Miggy Cabreras and guys out there that can just make all kinds of adjustments. But you got to remember, there's probably one guy in the lineup that can do that to you. The rest of the guys don't have that ability for the most part. There's only so many Dodger teams out there, for example, like where everybody's good.
Thank God.
Yeah, right, exactly. So you just kind of have to really pair your arsenal with your intended opponent and understand what you're trying to accomplish. But you got to remember, you guys get to the big leagues. It's not that you can't teach them, you can, but it's very hard to teach somebody out of nowhere a big league quality pitch.
Yeah.
It's not just that easy. I've heard of guys that say, hey, I tried a cutter grip and it was awesome, and that's great. But if you looked at their arsenal, they already had a good slider. So it was just a grip adjustment. Teaching big league pitches at the big league levels is very difficult to do, but sometimes it's necessary. And that's what the offseason, that's what we do here. We really give those guys that ability to get as many touches as possible so they can get something together, take it back to spring training, work with their pro coaching staff, and then make a decision and go, hey, we're gonna try this during the game. What are the results? So.
Well, let's just cross our fingers and hope that Jones finishes learning that splinker, Jim, like he was talking about in last year towards the end of the season. Another thing I wanted to talk about with those types of pitchers, because we talked about a lot of differences there between those two and a lot of similarities too. Does it seem odd that the plan seems so universal for pitchers across the league? Like 100 pitches is the barrier for everyone. X amount of innings seems to be the barrier for everyone. You know, you're looking like 200 is a max season now for like the very elitist of elite pitchers. Why are we treating them all the same?
I know why they do it. You know, they try to put everybody in the safest bucket possible. And I understand that. You have excuse me, especially now with the money being handed out, you really have to hedge your bets. You want to be able to get maximum value out of your investment. You know, you're paying a starting pitcher $21 million. You're hoping to get minimum 25 starts out of that guy, right? Hopefully 28 to 30. Putting limits on them that seem to be okay and safe for the most part. I understand that. But there's a lot of players that are out there now, and it's a big topic of discussion that are like.
I'm just saying, like a Justin Verlander, for instance, is a guy that they used to let throw 120 if he needed to, 130 even. I've seen. I'm not saying like that's going to happen a lot today, but a guy like Paul Skenes can probably handle more than 100 pretty easily if he wants to.
So that's a great point. So think about this. When he came out of LSU and then signed with the Pirates, he had a little time off. Then he went to FCL for basically a day. Went to Bradenton, had a couple starts or a couple appearances. 3 innings. But then he went to Altoona and he didn't do so hot. Had to really throw a slider to get out of trouble. Fastball was getting hit. People were like, "What? Like what happened there?" He thrown a lot, and he threw a lot of high leverage innings in the College World Series. So the smart play was, he's done. Thank you. It's nice to see you. You look as advertised. We'll see you in spring training. Go get some rest, kid, and we'll see you in February. And that was a very good plan on their part. Come in, essentially the next year, 7 games, 0.99 ERA. Obviously, filling up the zone. I think what is 27 innings and 8 walks. Obviously, there was nothing left to prove. Gets up to the big leagues and does exactly the same thing, right? So fills up the zones, nasty with multiple pitches, attacks. Had established himself as basically an intimidating factor, but still only threw 133 innings. And if you look at LSU, he threw 122 and 2/3 innings, and then you couple that with his minor leagues innings, he's almost through again what he did this year. I mean, I think he had 27 in AAA, so 133, so 100. Let's say essentially 150 innings. Yeah, that was a good special increase. Nice limitation there to make sure this is your guy. He's 1 of 1. You want to make sure he's going to be good for 25, 26, and 27.
He is 1 of 1, and I think where my fear comes from with a guy like Paul Skenes, he can strike out a ton of guys. That takes pitches. So if we're artificially limiting him to 100 pitches, and that's not his line, even though it is 98% of guys' line, I'm just wondering why 100 seems to be the magic number. Is there actual science behind that?
Well, we thought there was. So there became a consensus somewhere that at 100, was magically picked out of the air. What I presented at a conference a couple of years ago, and myself and some other really, really sharp guys that were in the business said the reason we went to 100 is because we trained for 100.
Okay.
See, in Japan, they don't do that. There's guys that throw like you can't even imagine. Some of their bullpens are over 100 pitches in a bullpen. And they'll throw again 2 days later, and they throw and they throw and they throw and they throw. Now, there's a lot of arm injuries associated with that, but I would never go that route. That's too far. I just don't think the body can recover from that easily. But we trained to 100. I thought, honestly, if we trained to 120, it would probably be different. But you also kind of look at, for a long time, 100 pitches got you to seventh inning. Doesn't happen anymore. 100 pitches,
right.
About 4 2/3 and 5 now, because the command isn't as good. Guys don't stay in the minor leagues longer to get the command down. It's rush to get up. Arbitration clock starts. We got to get going. You got to get these dollars made, right? That's a big driving factor. So there were some studies out there that showed, after 100 pitches, each set of 10 pitches after that is exponential more stress on the arm. All that's true, but again, remember, we were training to 100 pitches. And
so if you test them after that, of course, they're not used to it, right?
But if you train to throw 120, that could be a lot different. And there are guys out there right now that can definitely go 120, 125, 130. Probably no more exponential rest than anybody else, but organizationally, they've put this is a number. When I was with the Pirates, for example, and we were at Bristol, which missed that place. What a wonderful place that was, actually. I was lucky to be a pitching coach there. From our coordinator on down, there was hard caps. This guy is 5-75. And if he went to 81 pitches, you better have an answer why. You could be fired.
Yeah, I get it. I understand how entrenched it is. I was just wondering if there was any kind of actual study behind it. It sounds to me a lot like COVID, where they kind of went like 6 feet. We'll worry about whether we were right later. This seems safe, right?
Well, we're a society of tens. We do everything's in tens. Our clock is based on every 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Everything we count is by 5 10s and 20s, and somebody picked out 100 because it's the biggest number that we usually go to right away, right? Yeah. We go 0 to 100, right? Everybody talks about it in those frames. So that's probably where 100 came from, and that's what we started training to. But
interesting.
Should it be that way?
Eric, you're right though. Like 100 pitches doesn't go as far as it used to.
Right.
That's even as utterly fantastic as it is to watch Paul Skenes, I know for me watching him as a Pirate fan, I've got one eye on his pitch count like all the time. It's kind of a ridiculous way to watch somebody, but his pitch counts tend to get up higher sooner than you'd like, and you're trying to get that 7th or 8th inning out of him, and boy, it's often a tough stretch. But it doesn't really just come down to teams are just they're erring on the side of caution as much as they possibly can, sure. And especially with guys like that.
Sure. And
it's not working.
Yeah,
that's what we're going to talk about because
there's still flaws in the process. You have to have parameters somewhere. I mean, you got to figure out what it is.
I think you have to be able to ask questions too. And,
sure.
and when an entire industry is set up, and I think a lot of what this study touched on, actually, we're going to talk a little bit about this MLB study on pitching injuries. And a lot of what they found is, what happens in MLB trickles down to the amateur levels. And, you're talking one small change can be a 10-year arc, of that changing in the game, right?
Correct.
So it's okay to ask questions about things like why are we stopping guys at 100 pitches? Why are we freaking out when someone wants to push for that no-hitter? Well, it's probably right now because they haven't trained for it.
That's correct.
So it's not necessarily that they're not capable or that today's player is soft. that's what they're being taught.
I think our players are in way better physical shape than at any period in history of the game. How they're built, their stamina level, how they get there, is the nutrition, the sleep, all these tracking devices. I mean, I'm wearing Run right now. I track my sleep every night. That prior was done by a handful of guys. I would venture to say now there's a handful of guys that don't do it.
Yeah, right.
It's definitely flipped.
So that's a lot of what this study found, is that the numbers that are being provided, we talked about it a little bit before we started the show today. It's become like almost Adam and Eve's forbidden fruit.
Sure.
It's your fault, sinner, that you ate that apple. Well, the pitchers are seeing this information in real time about their rotation, their velocity, their everything. And they're adjusting to it, and they're learning from it, and they're getting better with guidance from people like you. They're obviously chasing something, because that's what you get paid for in Major League Baseball, is being able to get guys out. That's what gets guys out right now.
Let me give you a really good example. College World Series, a lot of fun to watch this year. I mean, very exciting. Starters were coming out blazing, right? Guys that are 98 plus regularly. Who came in after?
Yeah.
88, 91. Throwing strikes, getting guys out. How many of those guys got drafted?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah. There are some that have, but they have incredible secondary stuff.
Right.
Incredible. I mean, plus 70, 80 grade slider, 70, 80 grade changeup, stuff that's hard to teach.
But at best, that's an 18th rounder, right?
But the rest of the guys that are getting everybody out don't do that.
Yeah.
And you can go down the list, whether it's Tennessee, whether it's Vandy, it makes no difference. Look at who's coming in next in a lot of these games. And it's somebody 90, 92, 93. When there's nothing wrong with 90, 92, 93. We were talking about this 10 years ago. That's guy's potential first rounder himself.
Yeah. So what do you do when a guy comes in and they're asking to learn something? Like, how do you decide, yeah, that's not for you? Or, yeah, you're not going to get to this number? Or do you never know that until you try?
Well, for us, it starts with we do a full screen on a player. We need to know who they are in front of us today, not who. We understand who they want to be, but we have to get a roadmap of how to get there. So if you don't move well, you're an injury risk, period. If you're tight and bound up, and again, I said earlier, like, I can't ask you to do something if I need you to throw a particular pitch. But if you can't move to get there, all I'm going to do is put a serious injury risk on you. Whether that be your obliques or your shoulder, or what's the next weakest link in your delivery, your elbow, you're going to have a problem if you don't move well, which is why so many teams are really moving heavily towards and heavily invested in these. So you always had strength coach, but now you have a performance coach, which is a little bit different, and it's very necessary. It helps with your recovery. It helps with everything that you're doing. We start there. So once we figure out how well you move and start working on some of your deficiencies, and that could not just be like, okay, he's more mobile this way. We also do strength testing too. So we know where your weaknesses are, because again, they used to say all the time, guys that would rip their hamstrings, they did the studies and found that's because their quads were too big. So they didn't have equal pulling parts, right? So we have to make sure that the guy's not too strong here and he's weak back here, and the next thing you know, we've got a torn rotator cuff. So we take care of all of that first to get a guy in optimal throwing shape. Then we do the pens to see what their arsenal looks like, and then we talk about, okay, why do you want to add this? Did you just see it on Twitter yesterday? Or is it a situation where a guy's got a pitch that goes this way and this way? That's great, but he's got nothing up and down. So guys just pick a half of the plate, they sit on it, and they hit you all day long.
Yeah.
So we have to make sense of your true media report and find out where you're getting hit, why you're getting hit, what counts you're getting hit in, and what's lacking in your arsenal in order to get you another pitch to get somebody out.
That's just it. That goes back to what you were talking about when we were talking about making sure you have stuff down and away, up and in, because hitters, the good ones, the ones that are advanced, they will cheat, right? They start to cheat. They start to know where you can't reach them on that plate, and so you have to be able to counterbalance that. Eric, let me just ask you this. This is a broad question. Are we reaching the point with arms that there's not a lot more we can get out of some of these out of the human body, the human arm, when it comes to the velocity, the spin rates that we're seeing? Are we nearing that point, do you think?
Well, I believe we are. They did some cadaver testing on UCLs. Can't remember how many years ago. Did see some of the reports that the UCL was breaking quickly at 106 to 108 miles an hour stress. Okay. So they measure different things in Newton meters of stress and different valgus forms, et cetera. So to figure out how much stress, because usually a UCL doesn't tear in one pitch. Like it's not a single state occurrence of, oh, he threw this, it boom, it blew up. It's usually over time. They estimate 20 to 25% of pitchers with partial UCL tears are asymptomatic. They don't even feel soreness or pain. We've seen that with guys that we worked with. We met through their recovery. It was like, I never felt anything. All of a sudden it just popped. And they went and looked, at MRIs and different things. They're like, well, yeah, this was fraying and this thing happened. But to answer your questions is I think we're getting to a point where we are getting there. And the reason I think we're getting there is because we're seeing guys who were particularly healthy without any. But now, the reason I mentioned asymptomatics is there's guys that think they're healthy that they're not. But let's just say the other 75%, okay, that were in college as a freshman, sophomore, 92, 93, 94, doing well. Told by a scout, you don't have enough yet. So they chase the 100.
Sure.
They get bigger, stronger, which is usually the first factor. And then they do start throwing harder, 98, 99, 100. I mean, we got guys in here that throw 100, 200, 3 miles an hour. And when they were freshmen and sophomore in college, they were 92, 93, 94. They didn't break when they were 92, 93, 94. But they break when they're 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103. Does it mean they were always going to be healthy at 92, 93, 94? For, a 10 or 12, 15-year major league career, you can't say they're never going to go on the disabled list. That's impossible. But the extent of the injury and the damage, like the UCL damage, the tear is pretty significant. And there's a lot of factors that go into that now. Like that's why, we prepare guys, we prepare their arm better. But I think we are getting to the limits, and I think we're seeing the UCL damage at a higher level because we're pushing the envelope so far.
Right.
But listen, there's no other way. If you want to do this and compete, you better do it because that's where it's at. I mean, there's not, like I said, there's not a lot of guys that are getting taken at 90, 91, 92 miles an hour. They just were really good, and they go home and get a job.
Roughly 35%. Roughly 35% of the top 10 rounds of pitchers drafted have had UCL surgery as of this last year, according to this report.
It took a long time for me to actually meet somebody for all these years that had two. Now I see it all the time.
Yeah.
Guys who have had two, a revision of this, of that, just got a referral from a doctor in Dallas. Wants to send a guy up here. He's had two. They were exactly the same place, exactly the same circumstance. So, there's clues there. So we need to figure out what it is he's doing to replicate, because the statistics for going after two is, you don't always make that one back. And if you have three, I don't know if you can make it back. Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. So, and a lot of it has to do with age. Like, you might have one at 20 You may have another one at 24. If you have another one when you're 27 and you have to sit out a year, then you're 28, and then you become less valuable in baseball terms because you're aging out, right? So
Jameson Tyon comes to mind.
I think of JT Brubaker.
JT Brubaker.
Yeah,
when it's the last thing he needed right then,
Exactly.
It's like,
so
the other thing
off the rails, right?
The other thing this study showed is that a lot of these UCLs are popping up like in spring training,
and they have
instead of the end of the season, or as the season's going on. Most of them are happening early. I've talked to a few pitchers that suggested like they should just keep throwing throughout the off season.
Yeah.
I don't know where you fall on that or what
100%.
The conventional wisdom is right now.
So it's like running. Okay, this is the best thing that I can tell you. And almost all of our pro guys throw 11 months out of the year. Some just take 2 weeks off. Our college guys are about 10 months. Our high school guys are about 9 to 9.5 months that they throw out of the year. Very healthy, very healthy. We got high school juniors and seniors in here that throw 95, 97 miles an hour. No problems.
Yeah.
Because it all relates to stress. So putting the body under stress so that it starts to grow around the stress, strengthening the ligaments, the tendons, the muscle fibers, all the connective tissue, but recovering from it. We're getting way better at the recovery. But let me throw something at you here. So for a long time, the injuries were happening between February and end of April. A lot of them were happening in spring training. A lot of guys were hiding it too. So what would come out of that was guys weren't throwing a lot. And there was another study that was done about where these guys lived. So if they came from Connecticut, where they can't get out in long toss, they were getting hurt in spring training because they were limited to throwing maybe 60, 70 feet. Okay. So the other aspect of that, I think, has been cured. Most of these guys were making no money.
Yeah.
Now they get paid year round. Now, granted, they're not getting paid a ton of money, but they're getting paid enough money that they can train in the off season regularly versus killing themselves all day at a job that, whatever the case may be, then going to train tired and potentially cutting their training short because they're exhausted.
Sure.
And they get to spring training not ready. So I think now that they're actually training, using the money to train, not having to worry about working all day, every day. They've probably got a part-time job, but they're not literally working to the bone every day just to try to make some ends meet. I think you'll see better results from that alone. Also, the fact they're training better. Going back to now we know what the stressors are. We know how to alleviate that. We know how to get deliveries better. We also know how to recover better. So
that really just started, so we really shouldn't see fruit from that for a little while. But that's something to think about and look for.
I think from last year to the next 4 or 5 years, you should see some dip in that curve based on that. It's not going to be a huge dip because, again, we are pushing limits.
Yeah, right.
So, we're never going to be here again.
Eric,
Jim, I probably got one more for him, but if you got one more, have that.
Yeah.
Well, you touched on something that I do want to explore for a minute. You talked about guys with arms, and obviously you have to self-report, right? If there's something going on with your arm, guys don't necessarily. I think it's twofold. One, you don't want to admit that there might be something wrong, right? I'm just going to ignore it and hope that it's just a little weird. I had a weird twinge and I'm fine. What do you tell pitchers, and what did you notice even when you were with the Pirates about guys not really even wanting to say there might be something wrong? And what do you tell guys now? Because to me, it's like concussions, right? It's like you guys don't want to say that they're hurt. They don't want to be, off the field. They want to play. So
if you're not a priority guy in an organization, so you know if you are.
Right.
Nobody would say they were hurt because they're afraid you're going to be released. Dream's over, right? No guarantee you're getting picked up by somebody else. So I've said this a lot of times, okay? If I had $1 for every time a pitcher lied to me about his status, I'd have a beautiful home in the Bahamas right now. Okay.
Yeah.
It's just inherent because you want to be able to play. Derek Johnson, pitching coach for the Reds, told me this several years ago. It's in some of his books now. The number one attribute of a pitcher is availability. If you're not available, you're useless to the team. So nobody's at 100% after coming out of spring training anyway. A tweak, a twinge, a soreness of this. That's why these treatments are so special. I mean, you look at the medical team that these teams travel with and the gear they travel with. It's astonishing. But I'll tell you what, it's miracle working. I mean, it's amazing. You can wake up to the point where you can't brush your hair, and by noon, hell, you're throwing. You're good to go. Hey, man, I feels good. Thanks, Doc.
That's a great segue for my question for you, because what do you think of teams that are having their pitching staffs decimated, if not completely wiped out in the season, like Miami? Is there something that can be looked at there, or is it just
well, they did. Miami wiped out their pitching department this offseason. They brought in some Bill Hessel and some guys that I know down there that have real good experience with this. With Gabe Kapler and Rachel Balkovec down there, both of them are very driveline related, know that there's tons of science going on. They knew that there was going to be a better and they have to do that. They have to develop their people. They cannot afford to lose a year of development shelving player after player after player.
I think we're familiar there, bro. I mean,
they cannot afford to continue to happen because their greatest asset will be much like the Braves and the A's were back in the day in the 90s, where they had pitchers coming out of their ears. So every time they needed a player, they just got rid of this guy at a AA and this guy at a high A, and then next you know, trade deadline, they had the bat they needed, right? So the Marlins have to operate that way. That's their currency, pitching.
Yeah.
And you better develop it and develop it well, and you better develop it twofold, because that's how they're going to make it. They're not going to add payroll every year. But they can go get all the pieces they need if they have a very plentiful and fruitful pitching department. And you had asked a question earlier about what do I say to these guys about their injuries. We encourage them to tell the truth, because I just had a conversation with vice president of player personnel for a team, really sharp pitching guy, awesome, smart. They expect injuries now. So they don't like it, but they're getting rid of the notion of, if you're hurt, we're just going to get rid of you. We'll take care of you. We'll have your surgery, and then we'll give you a settlement. And you're gone. Those days are, I wouldn't say they're going away, but more teams are getting more comfortable with the fact that, hey, it happens, man. Sorry,
right.
But so teams are doing a better job of quelling the fear. So we try to tell them to be as honest as possible. But is that ever going to happen? Well, it's never going to be 100%. I don't think it's ever going to be 75%. But I think more guys can communicate better that something is bothering me.
Well, Eric, it's been great having you on, and we're gonna say goodbye to you here before we take a break. But one last question for you.
Yeah.
You're the pitching god of baseball. They're asking you to fix everything.
That's Brent Strom, by the way.
Yeah, I hope so. That's awesome.
He is.
But they're asking you to kind of help fix the baseball pitching program, where the starters aren't going as far, and it's Rob Manfred's dream that they're going to last in the games longer. What do you do? What do you implement?
Command training.
Yeah.
Put the ball where you want it. Look,
that's all it is. Just get it over the plate.
I live in Cincinnati. I watch the Reds. Oh my God. You got guys throwing balls over people's heads. I mean, and it's all.
No offense, but I hope that continues for a little while.
Yeah, when they're playing Pirates, right? The command. That's, instead of going 5-6 pitches in at bat, you go to 3. That's what we always say, win the 2 out of 3s, right? Get ahead, get them out. and training is going that way. There's a lot of methods that are now being employed. I was at ABCA in Washington, D.C. this last week, and there's a lot more methods. I'm like, okay, we figured out how to throw hard. Now we got to get across the plate.
Right.
You get it across the plate, you're gonna go into the seventh instead of the fifth, because look at all those extra pitches. We're not big on waste pitches. Why?
Right.
So if I have 4 guys that I faced this inning, I threw each one of those guys a waste pitch, and I did the next inning, that's 8, and I did it again the next inning, that's 12. That's an inning.
Great stuff, man.
Go.
It definitely seems like teams for a while forgot about command. They just, were chasing velocity, and they would live with it. But I think there should be a kind of a merging of the two, right? Where you can still do what you want to do velocity wise. Okay.
You just have to. You have to go through it. How many people were training guys to throw 99, 100 over and over and over? Nobody was. Now we do it all the time. Okay, we got that down. Okay, now we're overcoming some of the injuries. We're doing better with it. But then it was, everybody making fun of, I saw a guy throw 100 5 times. It wasn't a strike. Well, yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I just watched a JUCO pitcher the other day throw, Basing kid throws 100. Doesn't have a job.
We just watched Kyle Nicholas walk the bases loaded 4 times in Paul Skenes' debut here, in front of a sellout crowd. So
get it over. Got to get it over. And that's very teachable. I'd rather teach command than anything. Very good ways to do that, ways to be consistent with your delivery, being able to have the confidence and the touches to be able to do it. And the coaching's getting better. I don't think pitching coaching is very good, honestly, overall right now. Too many guys are reliant just on data, but, that was part of it. But now it's merging, and I think we're getting there. But the command is, look at your closer. How many pitches does your closer throw?
Yeah,
the best command. Yeah, with the best stuff. So, look at your starter that way. And, there's a philosophy, and I know we got to go, but there's a philosophy behind that. Like, some guys with that over-aggressive mentality, we would tell them, hey, you're a 9th inning guy starting every inning as a starter. So they would look at it that way. Attack, in the zone, strike him out, whatever, weak contact, break his bat, and go. Okay, you're back up. Boom, same thing. I'm attacking. Boom. And as few as pitches as possible. 11, 9, get a 7 in there. Whatever the case may be, instead of these 18, 21 that makes the game boring.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. That's a skill that takes time to learn, and guys aren't given that opportunity a lot unless they can do a lot of those other things we talked about.
Got to get them up because of control and money and arbitration and everything else. You need to get these guys up there so you don't expose them in the draft and the Rule 5 draft, everything else. You got to get these guys up the chain. I get it, but it's at the sacrifice of command, honestly.
Eric, you're the greatest, man. You're always gracious with your time. As busy as you are, to make time for this, we appreciate it, man.
I'm happy to do it anytime for you guys. You're always gracious to me. Love you guys. Love the Pirate fans. I've always had great things to say. Anytime, as you can see, my jersey still right there.
Oh yeah, I've been eyeballing it the whole time.
I got them all over the place. So many great memories for me. Definitely always going to be a Pirate, man. It's always going to be right here. So.
Eric, all right, hey, we'll catch up at a game this year. I'm head out to Cincinnati or something.
Let's do it.
Get time off.
Let's do that. I can tell you, man, these conversations for me, they're the best. I love diving deep into this stuff. I love to learn the things the knowledge that you have, and you're always gracious, and I appreciate it. I know Gary does too.
No problem. We're always learning.
Thanks,
always.
Man. That's the point. Eric. Let's take that break.
All right, take care, Dan.
At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects.
All right, welcome back to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. Gary and Jim with you. We have some Pirates stuff we got to talk about, Jim. We have to. They did some stuff. And we have a poll. We got all kinds of stuff we wanted to touch on. So I figured let's do it a little bit.
Absolutely. Listen, that to me is the best conversation to have right there. Like diving into that stuff, Gary. Like
I love it,
hey,
Jim.
Oh,
I love it. I could talk for hours with a guy like that, because for one thing, it's one thing to read those studies. Like that study that MLB put out, it was comprehensive. I enjoyed it. I'm glad they did it. It's important work. I hope they keep working on it. But then when you get to talk to a guy that, like, you go and appreciate diamond rings at the engagement ring store. That's one thing. But then you go and see how they actually get them and what they have to do to turn them into that. Maybe you don't cry as much when you give that credit card over the counter, because it's not as easy as you think to get pitchers. And
no,
when you get a guy like, even we're going to talk a little bit about, the Pirates signing Caleb Ferguson. This leads right into it. I mean, you get a guy here that people are going, who's this? Like it's a 5-year major league veteran that's got like a 3.68 career ERA. This is the type of player that you want them to be bringing in right now. You want them to be bringing in fortifications for that bullpen. I mean, they don't all have to be Aroldis Chapman or Tanner Scott.
No, and to do it reasonably as well. You know what I mean? Like, I'm all for that. Listen, and these guys work hard to get paid in this league, right? So like even these arbitration deals we see, and they come to terms and whatever, because I think, we know a little bit about how hard it is to get there. I'm all for it when I see these guys getting paid, because man, to even get to the point where you are able to make some money is impossible to get there.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
So I've had this QR code up here in the corner of the whole show, and I guess if you got curious and scanned on it, cool. But it is actually me being selfish and promoting something that I'm doing. That's polar bear plunge I'm going to do for Special Olympics here. So if you scan this QR code, you can donate to my polar page and help me help Special Olympics by jumping in freezy cold water. And then I think I've already promised that I'm going to go over to DK Pittsburgh Sports afterwards, dripping wet and cold and shivering, to take a picture. And if you guys get my donation page up over $1,000, and it's already halfway there, I will put the video up on this show. So,
well, allow me to donate that.
But anyways, that's a little side note, but I hope you do. It's a good cause, even if you don't contribute to me. Find somebody who is doing it, contribute to them, and help move this along. You want to do Call Your Shot, Jim, or do you want to do the poll? But either one will work next week if we want.
Let's do Call Your Shot.
Let's do Call Your Shot, he says. Surprising said person who's not ready to hit the button for Call Your Shot. All right. As always, Call Your Shot is brought to you by our friends at shopyins.com. And I'm not going to put their little yellow logo up there because I'm leaving my QR code up there. But you know how to get to them. Shopyins.com. All kinds of cool stuff. Go check it out. It's from Yark. Adam Yarkovsky here. With all the typical gripings about spending money and adding to this 2025 roster, I was thinking, what if the offseason started in July 30th last season? What he's basically saying is, like, what if all the additions they made last year, like Billy Cook and Nick York and IKF and BLDC, even though it didn't work out, should they not count basically in whatever the improvement is, because they didn't really contribute to that record a whole lot last year? I think if you're a really, really fair-minded fan that wants to find a reason to be okay with the offseason, yes. It's difficult to say because like when I put together like when I try to put together like the 13 position players that are going to be on this team right now, Jim, even while I still want them to get somebody else, I wind up with 3 or 4 players that I kind of want to watch play baseball that I don't think are going to make the team. You know what I mean? Like, right. So I guess I can say, yeah, because Nick York and Billy Cook are 2 of those guys that I count in that. And IKF I certainly want on the team. So, yeah, there's 3 guys they added last year at the deadline that very much so I think are geared towards improving this team this year. But I can't even tell you 2 of them are going to make the team.
Yeah, I think it comes down to like, I think maybe if you look at it in certain areas, you could view it that way, right? But then there's other areas where you're like, well, you know, there's that, but now we still kind of know what we need. That's what the real off season's for. So I tend to split it up just because I think you can kind of categorize the 2 separately. So I get where York's going. I tend to look at it as like they're different in their own sort of way. And now it's time to really try to go out and find what you need regardless.
Yeah. I mean, the other side of that too is besides Brian Hayes, other players do get injured. So, I mean, it's not a bad thing to have players not make the team that you want to see because you probably will see them. And I don't mind even overstocking certain positions, you know, like I don't care if they get Alex Verdugo and you'd rather see Jack Sawinski or you think Jack Sawinski will be better. If Jack Sawinski starts hitting like he's going to be better, they won't care either. They'll play Jack Sawinski. Like there's really no blocking on a team like this because there's too many moving parts. There aren't enough people with their feet in cement at a position to start feeling like anyone's blocked.
Especially in certain areas, right? Especially at, you know, outfield, corner outfield, whatever you want to say. Like options should be good. Options should be what you hope. I will say you mentioned Jack Sawinski. Boy, his 2023 numbers start looking a lot better, don't they? After you take a look at what's available on the free agent market at certain times, don't they?
You start looking at some guys that are probably going to get upwards of 10 million on the free agent market. And you realize like, yeah, two seasons ago, Jack Sawinski bested that by double.
It's funny.
You would take that 220 and 27 home runs in a heartbeat and start it every day if that's what it took to get those numbers.
Almost an 800 OPS. Look, could he come out this year and it doesn't work out? Absolutely. He won't be the first and he's not going to be the last. But it's just funny to look back on those numbers and now take a peek at what's available. And you're like, oh,
My thing is, Jim, I can't look you in the eye with a straight face and tell you that I'm intrigued, excited, looking forward to Horwitz, and then pronounce Jack Sawinski dead. I just can't do it because I feel like there's a lot of potential there still. I think he's always going to have a strikeout problem. I don't think he's ever going to hit lefties great, but there's a lot more righties than there are lefties. And I want to see more. I do. And I think he's got every opportunity to win a job this year. And if that comes at the expense of seeing Billy Cook or Nick York or whoever you want to see that's not signed from outside, so what? I mean, like, this is the year to figure it out on Jack. You either give up on him or you know, he's going to make the team and stick.
Yeah, and the fact that he's lefty, right? Like, I mean, it's lefty with some power. He showed it.
I think some power is even underselling it. And I know you're not doing that on purpose.
Right.
Not easy power. That's the thing.
Sure.
If you can convince him that easy swing does what it's supposed to do, and you don't have to overthink it, I don't think this is as much about Matt Haig as it is Jack is a guy that has a real hard time adjusting in the middle of a season. Does one thing, he gets it in his head, and that's what he does.
Well, if anybody needed a reset, just to start over, let's restart things, it was Jack. I would remind people he only had 247 major league at bats last year. Yes, they were a mess.
Yeah.
But are you really want to just completely move on? I don't see a lot of teams that would do that. There are very few teams.
Yeah.
Very few teams in baseball that have the luxury of just saying, probably not going to work out for him.
I'd be interested to see what would happen if he started being involved in trade talks. The only reason I say that is because I think he probably has a little more value than most of us think. You know, we have him on the scrap heap, but I see us like, I see people suggest like Spencer Torkelson. That's a guy, he's got 30 home runs in this league a couple years ago, right? He's really struggled. He's actually very, very similar side-by-side setup to Jack Sawinski. He's got 1,500 major league at-bats, you know, and it's the same thing. I mean, like, is he a valuable player? Yeah. I mean, they were trying to trade Spencer Torkelson for something this year, you know, and that's a guy they demoted to AAA for a lot of the same struggles Jack is having. Right. So,
and let me say this: if you're gonna, not you, someone, if you're of the mindset that most guys are gonna fail and it's not gonna work out, well, guess what? You're probably gonna be right a good bit. It's baseball. Yeah. So, we're not saying he's going to work out. That's the biggest thing about that is just that slow down. Let it not work out if it's not going to.
I do want to read the results of this poll, Jim, because I think I want to do a follow-up to it. Okay. Because your poll last week was, let's do a Pirates poll. We'll discuss the results on next week's episode. That's why I'm forcing this in here to make sure that we keep our promise. So,
all right. Well, hey, we can. Are you suggesting we might do a part 2 to the poll?
I think we need to. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
because you wrote what must happen in 2025 in order for you to say the season was a success. Go. 500 record, 10%. Contention, no postseason, 26.3. Postseason appearance, 57.6. And win postseason series, 6.2. I was a little shocked by that. Actually, I thought a lot more people seemed to be wanting to build a team that could absolutely win a postseason series. So I thought for sure that was going to be the measure of success. I think that's what I need to understand further if we do a second poll. Okay, so what do you think they need to add in order to gain a postseason appearance? You know, because I don't think it's the same discussion that I've been having online. I'm hearing like they should maybe get another starter. They need to get like 2 right fielders. You can't just have Verdugo. You got to have Verdugo and Grichuk. You got to have 3 or 4 relievers, maybe go and get Grandal so he's the backup catcher again and upgrade that position. Shortstop's a mess. Got to have a new starting shortstop. Well, if you do all that stuff, Jim, that expectation really should have come in as win postseason series.
It surprised me it was that low. I really thought you'd see. But you also have to, I think, take into consideration that some people just want to see the postseason. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I get it.
You know, so yeah, I mean, look, there was over 400 votes for this. I bet you if we ran it and got 800 votes, they'd probably come out to just about the same. But that's certainly where people's mindset was, that it was just a postseason appearance.
So next week, what I want to do is we'll figure out how to follow this up. You're a smart guy. You'll figure out a poll that makes sense for following this up.
All right.
And
because I still like we're running out of time, and we can revisit this. We'll do the new one, and we can get to some comments too.
Right, because that's what I wanted to do is read some of the comments. But I want to give it another week to kind of gesticate, if you will, sit around and just start fermenting, like
Sure.
like Pirates fans' brains have all off season, right? So,
yeah,
it's been pretty bad.
And who knows? We might have some news in the next week or two, as far as maybe they'll add somebody else that might shift people's thinking too.
Right. And then who knows? We're always working on guests. Anything could pop up, and maybe next week's completely different, and then we will lie to everybody, right?
That is correct.
It is what it is. Anyways, Pirates did do, sign somebody. That's a good thing. That's nice. I think we really need more of those relievers. This isn't an NRI type reliever. This is a good quality, I think, innings eater lefty, which is good. I wouldn't worry much about the starting thing that Alex Stump put out. I'm not doubting Alex. I'm just saying I wouldn't worry much about it. I think this is one of those things you kind of just have to say to a guy to get him to sign if he's got that kind of ambition. And the Pirates can afford to give him a shot at it. Who cares? If he beats Bailey Falter, he beats Bailey Falter. They still got a lefty for the pen.
Yeah, I didn't take it. It obviously raised an eyebrow when I saw it that they might consider him as a starter. But I'm of the same mindset. This if he can pitch, this works itself out.
Absolutely. And this also, I'd remind people, Colin Holderman, when he was acquired, they talked about potentially stretching him out to a starter. They even mentioned it with Aroldis Chapman last year when you and I laughed about it on the show. So,
can you imagine either of those two as starters?
Colin Holderman, yes, I think I could, if only because I think they would just have to have him back off on his velocity a little bit, and he still has nasty enough stuff that he could probably fight through 5-6 innings, if he really wanted to.
Yeah.
And they felt like it. He just hadn't stayed healthy long enough for me to think it was ever viable,
Well, that's been his thing. So,
yeah.
Listen, this was a good show.
Yep, good show, brother. So, hey, let's go Bucs, everybody. We'll do it again next week at some time. I think we're going to kind of settle in at 8 here for a while. It makes sense most of the time with Ben's hockey schedule and everything.
Yeah, there's always something going on here at this house. So let's try to do it later. I think we get more participation that way too.
Right. And also, everybody in California, hey, I know you've got a lot of listeners out there. I got a lot of friends out there. Be safe. I hope it clears up soon. Praying for you.
You have one of those situations, Gary, where I don't complain about the weather here, not when that kind of stuff's going on.
No way.
Let's go Bucs!
Yeah, buddy.